let's learn how to cast on and do a plain knit. We'll start with the relief cast on method. First, use the needle pusher to move the needles from position A to D. Next, set the carriage for plain knitting. Set the holding cam lever to position I. Then move the carriage slowly. As the carriage passes, the needles will move from position D to B. Run the carriage back and forth a few times to check the needles. Next, use the 1x1 needle pusher to move the needles from D to D. Make sure the carriage cam lever is set for plain knitting. Set both needle cam levers to position I. Set the side cam lever to the circle position. Set the relief leaf to the relief position. When casting on, loosen the stitch dial slightly. Open the yarn feeder and pick up the threaded yarn. Thread the yarn through yarn feeder 1. Close it. And hold the arrow. Pass the yarn over the needles in the D position. Now pay attention, don't pull the yarn tail too tight or vertically. Gently pull the yarn tail like this. Then slowly move the carriage. This completes the relief cast on. Now you can release the cast on yarn tail. Then move the carriage for 2 to 3 rows. After casting on, move both relief levers to the stocking position. Set the stitch dial to the normal setting. And knit 2 to 3 rows. Hang the weights. When hang the weights, be careful not to touch the sinkers. When moving the carriage, you can press down slightly. When moving the carriage, make sure to go 2 or 3 needles past the casting stitches. At the triangle position of the side cam lever, also go past 2 or 3 needles. This is how to do a relief casting and knit stock in knit stitch. Next, we'll knit Jacquard, including Punchcard installation. Please read the manual for part names. Before installing the punch card, let's briefly introduce the control panel. This is the slot for the punch card. This sensor lever reads the punch card. This is the pattern roll indicator. The stop lever controls the punch card feed. The triangle position is the feed position. The circle position is the card locking position. This is the line lever for pattern elongation. If you set the gray button to the L position, the pattern is doubled in length. Normally, we put this button in the yes position. To double the pattern length, set the button to L. The feeder wheel feeds the punch card. Next, insert the punch card into the slot. Insert a punch card vertically. Then rotate the feed wheel. This will feed the card through. As the punch card feeds through, hold both ends. There are 2 fixing holes on both ends of the punch card. Use the punch card clip to secure the punch card. Secure the left side the same way. Then rotate the feed wheel. Check if the punch card is installed correctly. Now look at the numbers on the punch card. If the numbers are consecutive, it means the punch card is installed correctly. Rotate the card to position 1 before knitting. After rotating it to position 1, press the stop lever. Then pull the carriage once to memorize the punch card pattern. Because the carriage has been pulled 1 row, the pattern is memorized. Now start knitting. Blow the punch card before knitting. Insert the rod into the hole at the back. This will let you see the numbers on the punch card clearly. Now let's start knitting. Jacquard Knitting uses 2 yarn colors to create patterns. The unpunched areas are knitted with yarn feeder 1. The punched areas are knitted with yarn feeder 2. Let's prepare the contrast color yarn. Place the base color yarn in yarn feeder 1. Place the contrast color yarn in yarn feeder 2. Then release the locking lever. The side cam levers on both sides of the machine head. Set them to the triangle position. Set the holding cam lever or Russo lever to position egg. Set the carriage cam lever to the focus position. Next, move the carriage to start knitting. During knitting, if you're worried about drop stitches, push out the nearest needle to the carriage. If you don't have dropped stitches, there's no need to do that. This is the wrong side of the fabric. And the other is the right side. Next, we'll enlarge the pattern vertically. Set the gray button to L. After knitting about 20 rows, be sure to move the weights up. This is the effect of vertical enlargement. When we switch to a different punch card, this is what vertical enlargement looks like. Next, we'll explain single motif knitting. We'll need 2 magic cams, a center cam, and a yarn separator. These are used for single motif knitting. Single motif knitting lets you place the motif anywhere within the width. If we want to fix the pattern to this position on the card, note the punch card pin and the 2 diamond shapes on either side. The stitch number strip below has matching icons. Place them accordingly. Next, we'll install the magic cams. To install the magic cam, point the side cam lever down. Align the magic cam with the hole in the carriage and tighten the white nut. Then move the side cam lever to the triangle position. Install the right side in the same way. Next, we'll place the center cams on both sides. Place the center cam at the X position on the punchcard device. Next, install the yarn separator. To install the yarn separator, push the needles to a position. Open the needle latches. Then install it after the 3rd needle. Be sure to open the needle latches. And install the right yarn separator the same way. Place the yarn from yarn feeder 1 above the yarn separator. Next, place the contrast color yarn below the yarn separator. And into yarn feeder 2. Place the cam lever in the fall position. Release the locking lever. And then slowly pull the carriage. The main yarn is above the yarn separator, and the contrast color yarn is below. During knitting, if the contrast color yarn moves above the yarn separator, remember to move it below the yarn separator. when we install it. Not too fast. Now we can see the single motif knitting. The center cams are for left and right. Don't get them mixed up, or single motif knitting won't work. The accessory box has 2 sets. Depending on the center cam placement, we can knit single motifs on both sides. Next, we'll cover tuck stitch knitting. The contrasting yarn is tucked inside, creating a 3D effect. There are 2 yarn guides on the connecting arm. The relief yarn is hidden above or below the fabric. Because we just changed the punch card, we need to run the carriage once, so it memorizes the card. Set the stitch dial higher than for plain knitting, by 1 increment. Both relief levers are down. Use yarn feeder number 1. The relief yarn is hung on the yarn tension mast. Remember, the relief yarn must be hung on the mast, in the carriage's direction of travel. Because when knitting a relief, this yarn will float on top, so adjust the yarn tension as needed. Set the cam lever to 0. Before knitting, push the needle closest to the carriage to D. And release the punch card lock. Set the side cam levers to the triangle position. Then move the carriage one row. Hang the tuck stitch yarn on the yarn mast closest to the fabric. As before, push the nearest needle to the fabric to D. While knitting, if the tuck stitch yarn is too loose, adjust it or pull it gently. When creating an embossed knit, you can move the carriage slightly to make it easier. This is embossed knitting. The visible side of embossed knitting is the front. This is the effect of embossed knitting. Next, we'll do tuck stitch knitting. With tuck stitch, the punched areas on the card are knitted. The unpunched areas simply hold the yarn, creating a tuck effect. Since we've changed to a new punch card, we'll knit one row so the carriage memorizes the pattern. Sets the side cam levers on both sides of the carriage to the triangle position. Set the cam lever to the T position. Turn the stitch dial up one notch to 6. Release the punch card lock and slowly pull the carriage. If knitting feels rough or you fear drop stitches, push out 2 needles on the far side from the carriage. the inside is the right side. You can also customize it to your liking by using contrasting colors to flip the sides. That completes the tuck stitch. Next, we'll cover skip stitch fairyzal. In phase, in knit, where the punch card has holes. Where there are no holes, the yarn floats and is not knitted. Because we just changed the punch card, we need to run the carriage across. To continue the punch card pattern, then place the yarn into yarn feeder number 1. Set the cam lever to the SJ position. Because skip stitch fairyzal fabric is tighter, increase the tension by 1 to 6. Release the punch card lock lever, and then slowly run the carriage across. If it doesn't run smoothly, by pushing out a needle furthest from the carriage, you can fix this. For fairyzal, this side facing us is the front. This is what fairyzal looks like. Next, we'll talk about mock rib. We can use a thick yarn and a nylon yarn, or combine thinner yarns of the same color to create a lace-like effect. Because we changed the punch card, we need to pass the carriage once to memorize the pattern. Set the cam levers on the carriage to L position. the rustle levers can be set according to the carriage position. First, set the rustle lever on the carriage's direction to position A. Set the other rustle lever to position 8. And push one needle on each side to D position. Where feeder 1 is for knitting the base. Wire feeder 2 has the thin nylon yarn. Release the punch card lock, then slowly pull the carriage. For each pass, push up every other needle on both sides to D position. This is mock rib. If you choose yarns of different thickness for mock rib, using 2 of the same color, gives this effect. Next, we'll explain plaiting. Plaiting involves knitting with 2 yarns together, so we'll increase the density by 1 notch. For plaiting, we need a thin yarn like this. First, place the thin yarn in yarn feeder number 1. Then, use the transfer tool to hook the yarn up into the plaiting feeder. Place the base color yarn into yarn feeder number 1. Close the yarn feeder. Typically, we use plaiting for plain knit. Now we'll use plaiting to knit tuck stitches. First, set the cam lever to the T position. Release the punch card, lock and move the carriage. if it doesn't feel smooth while knitting. Then push out 2 needles farthest from the carriage. This is plaited tuck stitch.